What is going on, GBA? I am the Confusion, and welcome back to the weekly recap, week 2 of the GBA. I know I am really excited. If you are very excited, please let us know. But of course, I am not alone. Co-hosting me for the weekly recaps, it's Zilix.
Sorry, everybody, it's Oaks here.
And today, guys, we're going to cover some pretty amazing matches. Definitely a week I think was better than week 1. We have some interesting games to go over, and I'm actually really excited to go over them. A few things to note: I'm going to try so hard not to say the word definitely at all this entire... If you guys catch me saying definitely, other than what I'm saying now, please call me out on it, okay? I'm probably going to end up saying it, but... just wanted to throw that out there. Another thing is we're a little bit crushed for time, so we're probably going to go through this a little quicker. We might not be able to get through everything, and it'll be a little bit hard in terms of time, but we're going to do our best to give you guys a really good recap of the week 2 matches. So you know what? Let's stop talking. Let's jump into the first match. We have the San Francisco Giants and gym leader Gio up against the San Diego Chim Chargers and your boy MV. Gio is bringing Mew, Dugtrio, Rotom Fan, Haxorus, Mega Scissor, and the Ditto remix coming back to the games. On MV side, we have Hoopa Unbound, the Monster, Mega Pinsir, Empoleon, the worst defogger, and Tapu Koko, Incineroar, and Amoonguss. Obviously, I'm joking, guys. Relax, MV. Alright, so this is a game that I wanted to cover first because there's a lot to talk about here. First of all, if you guys haven't seen this match in particular, I definitely recommend it. It is full of plays that is going to get you guys excited. Start off with turn 1. We have Mew up against the Hoopa Unbound. That matchup is interesting, right? Usually Hoopa Unbound will have a better matchup against Mew, but Mew is covering that U-turn. So it is going to U-turn now, bring the Hoopa Unbound to the Sash. Mega Scissor is going to come in, because if you look at Gio's team, he does not have a Dark Resist, and switching into Hyperspace Fury was obviously something he was very concerned about. Mega Scissor seemed like a very good option. Hidden Power Fire coming out though, and we made a very good play predicting that thing to come out. A lot of things could have came out if he was predicting a special attack because of how special this Hoopa Unbound particularly was. He could have switched into the Ditto and taken a pretty good hit. Now he had a Scarfed Hoopa Unbound. That was something I noticed, but hindsight's 2020. He didn't realize Ditto would not have been able to take a very good Hyperspace Fury. Otherwise, put him in range of Mega Pinsir Quick Attack, if that was the case. So I don't think it was the worst play, but I do think that MV made a good play in predicting that Mega Scissors to come out and clicking that HP Fire, so props to him. Later on, though, we do have some back and forth. The Mew was really good. I really did like the fact that it had U-turn, and the way this game played out with Mew was very interesting. I'll go into that soon. Later on, though, Gio does read that there is going to be a Shed Shell on the Tapu Koko. A very smart read, a very good read. Normally you wouldn't expect so many eject buttons, but the fact that you have a Dugtrio on your team should make you aware that, you know, there could be not eject buttons, could be Shed Shells. So he did play with that well and kind of read that MV might be bringing a Shed Shell on his most offensive Pokemon, being Tapu Koko, and the fact that it is so weak to Dugtrio, I think definitely, I said definitely again. I think was a very good play reading that and switching out into the Mew, because now you had the Mew versus the Amoonguss, and the valuable information that Dugtrio was Scarfed was something MV didn't realize. Dugtrio did switch out before the Tapu Koko switched out, and if he did realize that, then maybe he would have played a little differently, wouldn't have quick attacked every single time. I don't think it made a big difference. Later on, though, we do have the Ditto. It's going to copy the Incineroar and U-turn out into Mew against Empoleon. Now, this matchup between Mew and Empoleon is actually pretty important. Empoleon is going to defog first on the switch into Mew, and then set up the rocks as Mew breaks the Shuca Berry on that Empoleon, which is super important because later on Dugtrio is going to trap the Empoleon and kill it with an Earthquake. So breaking the Shuca Berry on that Empoleon was a massive play. However, it does let MV get rid of the rocks and set up his own. Now, of course, the whole debate over whether Empoleon is going to be a good defogger or not. In this situation, it worked out. But again, the recovery wasn't there, and he couldn't stay in which forced him to switch out into the Amoonguss. Now, I do think Geo should have definitely set up those rocks. Rocks were really, really big this matchup, and I mean, if you look at what would have happened if he set up rocks, it's pretty simple. He set up the rocks, the Rotom fan came in right after, right? As he set up the rocks, the Amoonguss came in. Now, once the Amoonguss came in, he hard switched into the Rotom fan, right? Let's say that was the case scenario, then the plays would have been exactly the same. So I do think if he set up rocks, he wouldn't have lost much. You turning out just as fine. I just do think the rocks would have helped him out later on, and I'm actually going to talk about that in a moment. I do want to mention, though, that when Rotom does come in, it tricks the Koko and manages to get off the Choice Scarf onto the Tapu Koko and give it the Shed Shell. Now, that's obviously huge because it allows the Rotom fan to take a Dazzling Gleam and slow Volt Switch out into the Dugtrio and trap that thing. Now, I have to say, Geo did play really well with the Dugtrio. I have not seen anyone play this well with Dugtrio, especially in the League-type format, where you can prepare for it. And as you saw, Envy prepared amazingly for this Dugtrio, and still Dugtrio is trapping Pokemon on the opponent's side and killing them. So right, Rotom does trick that Koko for the Dazzling Gleam damage, so later on the Rotom can die to a quick attack after rocks, and Dugtrio can trap the Koko. So that was a definite... Oh my god. See, I'm going to catch myself now. That was a good play. Afterwards, though, Pinsir does kill the Rotom as it comes in. Rotom was Death Father either way. Whatever happened, Rotom was going to be Death Fodder. It had very little HP, and because Mega Scissor went down so early, Geo didn't have removals, so the Rotom was pretty much the Death Father, and all this allowed was Ditto to come in and have that 1v1 versus Mega Pinsir. Mega Pinsir had the low happiness with Frustration. Ditto had max happiness, expecting a return. This is something I really don't know what to think about. Usually when you have Ditto, you go max happiness because opponents will carry return on things that can carry return, most normal types, or anything that gets a Pixelate boost, like Mega Altaria, Mega Pinsir, and the liking. I just think it was interesting because in a format like this, you might predict that your opponent would go negative happiness, 0 happiness, and run that Frustration. He still went max happiness, though, and obviously ended up biting him in the butt. Who knows, maybe just putting those 0 happiness IVs would have won him the game for the Frustration. But regardless, that's not what happened, so let's keep going. So obviously now he can't spam return, which means he's going to double into the Dugtrio because Empoleon is such a free switch on MV. The fact that Geo realized this and hard switch into the Dugtrio, great play. Aqua Jet could have been really cool to see there. I know MV has run Aqua Jet on Empoleon before, and I thought that if he did run it this time, it could have come in handy, obviously, seeing as how Dugtrio would have easily went down there, and he would still have his Empoleon, making it so that Geo would have no chance at winning, but that's not what happened. And the reason I find that important, the fact that he didn't have the Aqua Jet and had to lose his Empoleon, I'm going to talk about why that's important in a second, because Geo could have made a play that could have potentially won him the game that I don't see people talking about, and I'm going to get into that. So, the big question, right, was should Geo have set up rocks earlier once Empoleon switched out? I would have said yes, because if he did, he could have set up the rocks, he could have hard switched into the Rotom fan on the Amoonguss, taken a Clear Smog at max. If you looked at the Amoonguss set, it had a Clear Smog, Foul Play, and I think Giga Drain. The max damage that Rotom fan would take from that Amoonguss was Clear Smog at 22.9%. After that, he would have still lived a Dazzling Gleam, obviously barring the crit, and then survived to sack to the Pinsir later on. So I think Stealth Rocks was definitely the play. Damn it, I said it again. It was the play, and I think you turning into the Rotom fan wasn't necessarily better off for him. I think setting up the rocks was definitely a great play. Although, the last thing I'm going to talk about is the Mega Pinsir versus Incineroar. Now, when I talk about Mega Pinsir, I'm talking about the Ditto. We have I was about to say Mega Ditto. We have Mega Ditto, Mega Pinsir up against the Incineroar. Mega Pinsir is around half because it's been taking those rocks damage, and Geo played safely. He stayed in as Incineroar went for Flare Blitz. Now, I think if Geo would have played a little bit more recklessly, I wouldn't say recklessly, he could have just made another play. I know it was hard for him because it seemed like Darkest Lariat was a great play, but because the Flare Blitz was something I would have expected to ensure the kill on a Mega Pinsir, would have been to actually hard switch into the Haxorus. Now this I did my homework. MV told me in the comments last time, do your homework, and I did. So let me tell you what kind of calcs I did to show you what would have happened if Geo made one separate play. Instead of letting his Ditto die to the Flare Blitz of the Incineroar, he could have switched into the Haxorus. Now, what would have this have done? He would have taken 12% to rocks. That would have left him at 135 out of 153 health. Now, that Flare Blitz, it had, I believe, 52 investment, so the max roll would have left him at 83 out of 153. It would have taken around 52. It would have taken around 52 damage at a max roll Flare Blitz, right? I'm going to assume max rolls because hacks. So a Flare Blitz at a max roll after the rocks would have left that Haxorus at 83 out of 153. Now, I have no doubt in my mind that Envy wasn't going to make some crazy play. He would have hard switched into the Amoonguss. It seemed super safe. So if he did that, Haxorus could have won for the EQ. And then Foul Play. The Foul Play does 71 to 84, or in other words, 46 to 54%. Now, Haxorus, like I said before, after the Flare Blitz would be at 83 health. Now that leaves him at a 12.5% chance to die to the Foul Play. That's around an 88% chance to live the Foul Play after taking rocks and a Flare Blitz, and then killing with a counter. Now, keep in mind, it was still a chance, but the fact that I'm considering a max roll Flare Blitz, and the fact that there was only a 12.5% chance of dying to that Foul Play, makes it so that he had a 94% chance of living all that, the rocks, Flare Blitz, max roll, and the Foul Play, countering it the way he would have, the way he actually did, killing the Amoonguss, and then after that, from there, Ditto came in and spammed Rock Tomb after copying the Mega Pinsir. He couldn't switch into the Incineroar because 2 Rock Tombs would take that out. If he just stayed in with Mega Pinsir, Rock Tomb would have taken out the Mega Pinsir. I don't want to get into too much more theory mining, but I think that was something he could have done that would have helped. And I think it's important as an, as an analyst to kind of see these different potentials and kind of show them to you guys so you guys kind of have a full picture of how this game played out towards the end, because this end game was super interesting. But back to the actual game itself, that did not happen. He ended up sacking the Ditto, which ended up being the Mega Pinsir, but it was the Ditto. And after that, Mega Pinsir kind of just clicked return after Haxorus countered the Amoonguss, and that was pretty much it. Pretty much came down to speed control, and the fact that Envy did keep his win conditions well in the back with Mega Pinsir. Overall, I think both players played really, really well. I know I've been going on about this match, but I think it was an important match to talk about because it was a really good match.
In the next matchup, we have Tom and the San Jose Sharpedos versus Necrostevo and the Victorian Shadows. The Sharpedos brought a roster of Landorus T, Rotom Wash, Komodo, Scizor, Swallow, and Deontay, while the Victorian Shadows had their roster of Tyranitar, Lycanroc Day, Araquanid, Alolan Executor, Rotom Heat, and Mega Alakazam. Starting off the battle, Necrostevo sets up the Trick Room with his Alolan Executor, while Tom goes into his Deontay to waste some of those Trick Room terms, leaving both the Deontay and the Alolan Executor very low on health. Stevo then decides to send in his Araquanid to preserve his Executor for later. The Araquanid is able to knock out the Deontay with a Liquidation after taking a hefty chunk of HP from a Diamond Storm. The Sharpedos then send in their Swallow, nearly missing out on the KO with Boom Burst, which does allow Araquanid the chance to use another Liquidation on the Swallow before going down to the next Boom Burst. After this, a bit of pivoting takes place on both sides as Stevo brings in his Alakazam on quite a bit of damage from the Rotom, which does allow Tom to knock it out with the Swallow. Something kind of interesting follows this. While the Alolan Executor is out against Tom's Rotom Wash, Tom predicts that Necro would assume he would Volt Switch out into most likely the Scizor, so he stays in with the Rotom Wash, as the Shadows do go for the Flamethrower, leaving the Rotom Wash with exactly 1 HP, and the Alolan Executor does take itself out with the Life Orb Recoil. The Tyranitar then is able to revenge kill the Rotom Wash, and this begins to set up the way for Tom to potentially win the game. He sends in his Scizor to lure in the Rotom Heat, which does happen as he U-turns to the Landorus. He fires off a Continental Crush, easily taking out that Rotom Heat, and with the Rotom Heat gone, the Shadows lack a way of reliably dealing with the Scizor. So then Stevo sends out his Lycanroc and tries to set up a Swords Dance in the hopes that Tom would swap, maybe fearing like the Z move or something. But no, Tom did remain in with his Landorus, taking out the Lycanroc as well. The Shadows then are able to pick up one more kill with the Tyranitar as the Sharpedos sack off the Swallow, but Scizor is able to come back on the field and KO that Tyranitar, giving Tom the 3-0 victory.
So yeah, I think Tom overall just played really well with his game. The Landorus T obviously was a huge threat, and I think he played it well. The way he kind of maneuvered around the Rotom Wash and made sure that the right threats were in, had the right responses to the right Pokemon, I think the matchup was overall what gave him this win, and obviously the prep came big, knowing what Necrostivo was kind of going to do, played a very large role in Tom snatching his first win for Season 8. So that was really exciting. But going on to the next match, a match that was a little unexpected, I have to say. I did not expect the match to go the way it did. Let's talk about the Bronx Beartics versus the Melbourne Rotoms. Joey Pokimane bringing Excelgor, Miltank, Necrozma, Zygarde, Mega Gyarados, and Whimsicott, while Cybertron Aaron bringing Pelipper, Kingdra, Mega Swampert, Ludicolo, that whole Raincore, and then Kartana and Mimikyu, huge threats in the back. Turn 1, we have a really cool play between a Excelgor and the Pelipper. I want to say Aaron did make a great read. He realized that Pelipper is so important to his Rain team this week. I mean, he built his entire team based on having the Rain, so he could not risk losing the Pelipper to whatever it was Joey was going to do, and scouted for the HP Electric to keep Pelipper alive. Great play. Obviously, it ended up losing him as Kingdra, but getting the damage off on that Excelgor was really big, because then it forced him to sack that thing later on to Kartana, right? Kartana comes in, he breaks through Excelgor and Miltank with SD, and the Rain obviously helped him live the fire punches off the Miltank. Scarf Miltank found it a little funky because the damage output on a base 80 attack isn't that strong. I realized Fire Punch did well, but in the Rain, Kartana still bulked through those Fire Punches and just allowed him to SD and Seikathor through the Excelgor and the Miltank. So a bit of a questionable prep on that end. I see what he was going for. I just feel like a bulkier, maybe Curset would have helped him out against things like Mega Swampert and such. Regardless, though, it ended up working out. Kartana was really whittled down, and then Whimsicott came in and could have just HP fired. What ended up happening is Whimsy does go for the Sunny Day, which is good tech, but he wasn't in a position to click water moves anyway. I'm talking about Cybertron here and his Ludicolo. Ludicolo didn't really need to click water type moves. I mean, he had the Ice Beam, he had Grass Stab if he needed, so I found it interesting that the Sunny Day, was set up at that turn when really he switched into his Gyarados, and both Whimsicott and Gyarados don't bait out a water move. So yes, it stops him from being faster than Joey's whole team, but in terms of stopping the power that Ludicolo can possess and kind of dish out was really what struck me there. I felt like Tailwind could have helped him out, because at that point water moves really wasn't going to scare him anyway, and the Tailwind could have helped him keep up speed over things that could have come in later. Regardless, though, we have a very interesting matchup between the Pelipper and the Gyarados. Now, this was a matchup that I saw could have won Joey, right? Joey could have won with this Gyarados, and it was acknowledged on both sides. This Gyarados was, I think, great. Like, it was a great build. The fact that it had Rest Talk with Crunch, Mold Breaker, being able to just break through a Mimikyu, it wasn't an issue. He just had to kind of bait Aaron or Cybertron into thinking that he was safe to just whittle down the Gyarados with Hurricanes and Scalds. Obviously, the Scald Burn made Cybertron feel a little bit more comfortable, but once that thing rested up, it was complete RNG with the Sleep Talk turns. First off, he did get a Crunch and completely burned through that Pelipper. It did live because of how bulky Pelipper can be. I thought it was questionable, because if that Mega Gyarados was a little bit more attack invested, he would have lost his Rain, and that could have changed things, but because the Mega Gyarados wasn't heavily invested into attack and adamant and all that stuff, I think that's what kind of saved Aaron when it came to the rain. At that point, you have the +3 Gyara sleep talking and crunching the Pelipper, but it doesn't crunch the Kartana. It doesn't sleep talk through, and Kartana easily just click Leaf Blade and gets rid of that. So that was just something that came on to RNG. It wasn't, I wouldn't call it real hacks. It was a third chance, right? You can either land the rest, the Dragon Dance, or the Crunch. It landed on Crunch the first time, but it landed on rest the second time, so that was unfortunate. Regardless, though, after Mega Gyarados comes down, you have Necrozma getting ready to set up to win, but unfortunately, we do have some confusion, pun intended. The confusion clearly coming into play because of the fact that the Hurricane onto the Necrozma. The Necrozma was set up to win, but unfortunately, the confusion off of the Hurricane, Pelipper's Hurricane, doesn't give it the rock polish it needed, and that just leaves it to be swept by the Ludicolo. It was a pretty quick game. Usually rain is pretty quick, and I think Joey was prepared to win. It just came down to a few RNG rolls, and it sucks to see that happen a second week in a row, but the fact that last week it helped him, I don't think he can be mad that the RNG didn't this week. Obviously, it was doubled because he had the chance with the Gyarados with a third chance to hit Crunch, and then the confusion, I believe now it's 25%. It could also be a third. I'm not sure. I know it's less than 50, so it was in his favor to hit that rock polish and probably sweep thanks to the fact that Photon Geyser pretty much hit everything really, really hard. I think that was difficult to watch, but that is the game we play, and I think overall they both played really well, and I mean, it's only a 3-0. Joey can bounce back if he wants to, and I think Aaron did play very well in comparison to his first game. I have to give him props. I'm sorry that I didn't earlier. He definitely played, I said definitely again, he played much better than he did week 1, and I'm looking forward to seeing him improve further on.
For our next matchup, we have Monotui and the Tampa Bay Luxrays versus John Pokemon and the New Orleans Pelipers. The Luxrays brought a roster of Snorlax, Mega Charizard X, Palossand, Weavile, Slowking, and Registeel, while the Pelipers had their roster of Mega Diancie, Piloswine, Houndoom, Hariyama, Jolteon, and Cresselia. Here we have a pretty fast-paced match, a lot of back and forth from both coaches right off the bat. The Cresselia comes in on a Scald getting burned, which is going to do a decent amount to wear this thing down during the remainder of the battle. The Registeel is able to come in though, preventing a Toxic and getting up Stealth Rocks, which brings in the Hariyama. Now, Pokemon is running a very interesting Hariyama set. It is the Guts Flame Orb, but he also is running Substitute, and he is able to get behind a Substitute. However, Mono is able to send out his Palossand, which takes a knockoff very well due to the Colbur Berry, and he is able to break the Substitute. Mono is then able to heal up his Palossand, while Pokemon sets up rocks of his own with his Piloswine on the turn that Mono Snorlax hits the field. He uses this opportunity to set up a Curse as the Cresselia comes in on the Snorlax, which is able to get up to +3, allowing it to survive Hariyama's close combat and knocking it out. Pokemon then sends out his Diancie and starts to set up Calm Minds as Mono goes for the rest, which will force out the Snorlax and prevent the sweep from Mono because he was not able to sleep talk the correct moves that he needed. However, Mono is able to prevent the Diancie from setting up and sweeping as well at the cost of his Registeel and his Slowking. He stated that he miscalced, and according to the accidental calc, his Slowking would have survived, but I guess maybe he had like some numbers wrong or something, and because of that he went down to the Diancie. Regardless though, the Weavile is able to come out to revenge kill the Diancie, and also it is able to 2-hit KO the Houndoom, which attempted to set up a Curse. Very interesting. It did not end up working out, but interesting set. The Jolteon is brought in to revenge kill the Weavile, but not until after taking an Ice Shard, which did quite a bit of damage. This then allows Mono to bring the Snorlax back in versus the Piloswine, and the Luxrays do eventually get a Curse from Sleep Talking, which will seal the game after the Snorlax knocks out the rest of John's team, giving the Tampa Bay Luxrays the 3-0 victory.
So yeah, this game was really interesting, especially since Snorlax seemed like such a big threat, and I don't think it was prepared well enough. I think something that could have helped is Piloswine carrying the Roar. Overall, I'm not sure why it didn't. Piloswine is pretty standard with Roar. Maybe it's not, and I'm just going crazy. I just felt like this scenario, Piloswine did a really good job of carrying Roar because it didn't damage everything super hard, and just being able to phase things out would have helped him in this case, but Snorlax just showing how you cannot not prep for it. If it's not prepped for, like it has to be prepped for a lot, because if you let the thing set up, it's a problem. Every Pokemon on your team has to make sure you don't let it set up, because it's just a few curses, and I mean, that thing just rests and body slams and rests and curses, and it's a huge mess. But going on into the next game, a really interesting game. We had the Philadelphia Scissors up against Aster J and his Montreal Hapsolds, Chimpact bringing Nihilego, Tapu Bulu, Uxie, Greninja, Scrafty, and Victini, Aster bringing Scolipede, Metagross, Mega Lopunny, Milotic, Zapdos, and that Darmanitan. Now, this was a game that was highly anticipated by me, at least, because I knew that Aster is a good player, and I wanted to see how he was going to face up against Chimpact after facing against MV. This was I stopped myself. You can't count it. This was a game I was looking forward to seeing, and it really just started up with finding the setup for Nihilego to sweep. I mean, he didn't have great answers, and I think the whole problem with this game is Aster not realizing that Nihilego could have boosted its speed rather than its special attack and swept from that perspective. So all Chimp needed to do was weaken the Metagross, weaken the Milotic, and that's exactly what he did. He didn't worry about the Zapdos. I mean, albeit he didn't click the Z Dark Pulse for the Zapdos, which I found interesting, because if you just click Z Dark Pulse on the Milotic, then you already solved the problem, because Nihilego sweeps from there. So I think risking the flinch on the Dark Pulse was definitely something. I know I said it. It was something later on in the game. I know I'm jumping ahead of myself. It was something later on in the game that I don't think I realized paid off for him, just don't think was the right play. I think clicking the Z Dark Pulse to ensure Milotic goes down was a better way to ensure that Nihilego could have swept later on. Regardless, though, I'm going to start you guys at turn 1. We have Uxie up against Darmanitan, Uxie getting up rocks, and Darm U-turning. Now we have Metagross. Metagross takes a big foul play, so now Nihilego 2-KOs with its foul play. So this check to Nihilego, other than Milotic, is already whittled to the point where it is already whittled. I mean, there's no other way to say it. It's whittled down to the point where it cannot take on Nihilego comfortably, and there is no wish support. Sylveon's not here. The damage taken is there. I realized Aster was trying to maybe get some HP with the Tapu Bulu's grassy terrain and the leftovers, possibly. Even then, I just don't think it was going to be enough, especially after taking one foul play and then expecting to take 2 more if Nihilego was predicting correctly. Anyways, so he plays with the Uxie really well because it leads into Nihilego coming in, and Aster has to play well against it. If he doesn't play well against it, Nihilego, like I said, is just a huge win condition. As the game progresses, Milotic does get toxic, and that whittled, the fact that he is able to now whittle down Milotic, even though it has the Marvel scale, the fact that Toxic is now pressuring the Milotic to constantly click recover is a complete mirror of what happened last game. If you guys remember last game, the Sylveon up against the Empoleon, Sylveon always had to wish because it didn't have leftovers recovery. That's the problem that I see happened here that I think Aster really needs to get over if he wants to succeed. Milotic was forced to click recover every single time because the Toxic was whittling it down, and it needed that HP if it wanted to take on the Victini or even the Scrafty if it was banded, although that wasn't the case. That could have been scary from Aster's end, and it forced him to keep clicking recover. I found that to be a flaw, and I hope he realizes this flaw and prepares better next time to not allow his mons to constantly force themselves to recover as the opponent keeps pressuring them to take more damage, set up rocks, whatever the case may be. Afterwards, Milotic is able to get a few Dragon Tails up. Bulu is a free invitation to the Metagross later on, but Chimp does make a smart double into the Victini. So now we have the Victini in, and all this does is let Chimp hit up Milotic with a hard V-create. Now you might be thinking, what's the big deal? Milotic survived, Victini couldn't really do much. I mean, he was forced to recover again. This is the problem. The Toxic is what forced all this damage to be accumulating. So the fact that he had to keep clicking recover when normally he probably could have taken the V-create even though he didn't have the Marvel scale. The fact that he wasn't Toxic and could have recovered a little bit more easily on things like Greninja maybe would have helped him out, and I think that's what really forced him to sack the Milotic, because the Greninja's Dark Pulse was just so powerful. And that does go into what I believe was a misplay, a misplay in not Mega Evolving the Mega Lopunny. Now he didn't have a great switch into the Greninja, and he had to stay in to sack the Milotic to the Dark Pulses. So not Mega Evolving that Mega Lopunny right away, obviously I realized he forgot. It's his fault, but I'm not gonna, shoot him down for it. It's just the fact that I didn't Mega Evolve and he couldn't comfortably switch in the Mega Lopunny on the Greninja, even though the Mega Lopunny was so Spadef invested. It's just unfortunate that that didn't happen. Like I said, I think the better play would have been Bolt Strike rather than V-create, because that would have forced the Milotic to go down. You wouldn't have to worry about Dark Pulse flinches later on, and nothing really came in. His best answer to it was Zapdos. Like, he didn't have an answer, so the problem really wasn't there. I think he obviously should have clicked Bolt Strike. Worked out for him. Like I said, that Toxic was important, just like last week with Sylveon. Milotic just clicks recover, only letting threats like Greninja come in for free and pressure it with Toxic and Dark Pulse. That was what I consider to be the biggest problem, and pressuring the Metagross with Tapu Bulu and pressuring the Milotic with the Greninja was very smart on Chimp's end, because that is what allowed him to bring in Hillego to click Foul Play, Power Gem, Psychic, whatever coverage he needed. I thought from the team build that it was a little off that he wasn't bringing Special Attack, because a lot of those Pokemon might have been able to live, but Chimp was smart in whittling down the right threats, realizing Mega Lopunny had bulk investment, whittling the right Pokemon down to ensure his win. And the fact that Aster couldn't do anything about that because Metagross didn't have a form of natural recovery, and it was such a switch into so many Mons. The same thing with Milotic. I mean, they were switch-ins to Banded Victini, you had the Scrafty, didn't come in, but the fact that you would have to switch into that, the Uxie, the Uxie clicks Psychic against the Milotic, Foul Play against the Metagross, you might not consider that a lot of damage, but with Toxic on Milotic and Metagross not having great recovery, that adds up. So I think that's what I consider is the problem, and that's really what allowed Chimp to be in control majority of the game, because when you're on the back end and just have to keep recovering and making switches when your opponent is pressuring you, you have to find your ways around that. And like I said, having things like Volt Switch and Baton Pass is important. The Zapdos not having Volt Switch I found interesting. The fact that it couldn't even touch the Nihilego I found a problem, because Nihilego, like I said, was such a huge threat, and getting damage off on the Milotic or the Metagross would have been a problem either way. After a few spikes, Foul Play 2 KO'd the Metagross, regardless of the investment he realized after Mox. So I don't want to be too critical, but that's where I see the misplays and the problems in Aster's prep and gameplay. And then obviously more props to Chimp, because he played really well, recognized his win conditions and played towards that. So props to both of them. I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing Aster improve. I definitely see a weakness that I'm hoping he can catch on.
Taking a look at this matchup, we have the Kansas City Draw Chiefs, coached by Jolt, versus the Borussia Donphan, coached by Lars. The Draw Chiefs brought a roster of Hydreigon, Seismitoad, Mega Venusaur, Gardevoir, Arcanine, and Celesteela, while the Donphan had a roster of Tapu Fini, Tornadus, Cobalion, Kyurem Black, Gengar, and the Mega Manectric. Starting off the battle, the Draw Chiefs had their Hydreigon in against the opposing Tapu Fini. Jolt decided to take advantage of this situation and bring in his Venusaur, taking in Nature's Madness for the 50%. Now, Jolt figured that Lars would want to bring in his Kyurem Black, as normally Venusaur, especially in misty terrain, wouldn't be able to do much, as the terrain prevents those different status moves. However, Jolt had the fantastic prep of the Nature's Power Venusaur, which, for those of you who don't know, it turns the move into the Moonblast while in the misty terrain. This allowed for Jolt to knock out the Kyurem Black after surviving an Ice Beam from it. Lars then brings out his Tornadus in an attempt to revenge, however Jolt decided to preserve the Venusaur around for later, and he brought in the Hydreigon to take the hit, then U-turn out. Lars, however, also U-turned, being slower, which does allow him to bring in the Finny on the Arcanine. The next bit of the battle is just a bit of the Finny versus the Seismitoad, whittling each other down until Jolt eventually decides to sack his Venusaur and bring in his Gardevoir for the 2-hit KO on the Tapu Fini. The Gengar then comes in to try to revenge, so Jolt sacks off his Seismitoad and then brings in the Celesteela, which goes for the Corkscrew Crash, knocking out the incoming Tornadus. At this point, Jolt is good to sweep with either his Hydreigon or his Arcanine if he is able to get a little bit of chip damage, which he does do by damaging the Mega Manectric with an HP ground, and then weakening the Cobalion with his Gardevoir, bringing in the Scarfed Arcanine to clean up the rest of the match, getting the final kill with a struggle due to Gengar's Curse Body going off, leaving Jolt with a 3-0 victory over the Borussia Donphan.
I have to say, I think the prep with the Nature Power was very cool. Weakening down the Mega Venusaur wasn't the biggest problem. I found it a little bit hard to understand because the Mega Manectric was still there, so I felt like he could have switched out, maybe brought it in a little later, but getting rid of the Kyurem Black early on definitely worked out for him, because without Kyurem Black, things like the Hydreigon, the Gardevoir, the Celesteela even, didn't have to worry about that thing coming in or revenge killing afterwards. So yeah, I thought he played very, very well, and the Borussia Donphan just has to, keep going, fix the ground weakness I think they have, and they'll be in good shape. The next game I want to go into is the Detroit Steel Wings up against the Columbus Crew. Coach Z bringing Mega Ampharos, Mienshao, Weezing, Excadrill, Manaphy, and Celebi, and Crimson Seabad bringing Jirachi, Lycanroc Dusk, Kangaskhan, Cofagrigus, Thundurus Incarnate, and the Donphan. Now, right out the gate, I don't have too many notes on this matchup just because there's a few big things I want to talk about, and then we can kind of talk about the little things. First off, the way Coach Z is kind of taking on the format is confusing to me. He's not uploading team builds, so I can't really understand what's going on behind the prep. And as he's kind of going through the game itself, as I'm sitting there watching it, he's kind of just narrating it to me. He's not going into his plays. I can't understand why he's making certain moves. He's just kind of telling me what's happening. So, Coach Z, if you're watching, please try to explain more because your mysterious ways are a bit confusing. But going into the matchup itself, I mean, the bulky core that Crimson Seabed decided to bring with Kangaskhan and Cofagrigus, I found crazy because obviously Cofagrigus is a great bulky Pokemon. It does whatever it needs to do. It has Pain Split and Will-O-Wisp and all that good stuff. Toxic Spikes played obviously a huge role. Kangaskhan, though, is something I didn't expect. You usually don't see Kangaskhan in the format, let alone bulky. I mean, you do see Mega Kangaskhan built bulky with Wish, but not regular Kangaskhan. Ended up working out really well because it was such a nice check to things like the Mega Ampharos and the Manaphy. I mean, you saw how little Tail Glowed Up Surf did to that Kangaskhan. I would have never expected it. So the prep there was really good. They matched up very well. The Kangaskhan invited in offensive threats like Excadrill and Mienshao, but the fact that those Pokemon couldn't do anything to the Cofagrigus was great. And then not only that, but Cofagrigus was so good because of Mummy. I mean, when you think about the fact that Mienshao did have U-turn, so it couldn't have been that big of an issue, it could just U-turn out. The Toxic Spikes and the Stealth Rock added up because he clicked U-turn and lost Regenerator. That was a huge impact into whittling down the Mienshao to the point where he couldn't keep switching between the two. So that was really good. Thundurus, I mean, if you just look at Coach Z's team, Thundurus manhandled him. Things like Thunderbolt, Sludge Wave, and Z Focus Blast was really all he needed. Nasty Plot just for flair. I mean, he brought it in at the right times and dealt the right damage. I think he played this game much better than last week because he realized when to set up, when to bring certain Pokemon in, and how to handle the threats better than he did last week against things like Heatran and the Flygon, in which it was a little harder for him to see what was going to happen. I think he played this well, and if he continues to play this way, he's going to do a lot better in the future. I think some things to notice is definitely the way he played Donphan was really well. Clicking knockoff as well as Cofagrigus, clicking knockoff on so many things. The leftovers and the black sludge on things like Weezing and Celebi was really nice because it made sure that they took the damage of Stealth Rocks and Toxic Spikes without gaining recovery. So that was just good play. I mean, he got rid of their recovery and whittled them down with hazards, and the offense was just so well checked. Manaphy and Mega Ampharos did nothing to Pokemon like Donphan and Kangaskhan, literally. I mean, it was crazy, because then you had things like Mienshao and Excadrill, which, when probably wished upon, Cofagrigus just handled all of those things. I was a little worried, because obviously Excadrill could have done a bit of a job if it wasn't scarfed, or if Coach Z predicted a little better on what would have came in, but Crimson Seabat played well with wishing into the Cofagrigus. I just think this team, suits him really well, and if he continues to build this way and plan this way and execute the way he did, he's going to have a much better season. Coach Z, on the other hand, I'm struggling to understand what his true weakness is, because I can't see insight into what he's trying to do. So as an analyst, that's a little hard for me. I can't completely spot on see what's his problem, but overall I think his problem is just with the way he plays. His prep isn't the worst. I've seen worse prep. It's the fact that he's not making solid predictions. He's making crazy predictions at wrong times, and I think if he just, focuses on making the safe plays and executing a little bit more crazy plays when the time is appropriate, he'll do a little better. If he wants to make team builders and talk about why he made certain plays, I can obviously help out a little bit more, but overall this is a game I can't talk too much, because it was just about whittling down the opponent's side and then bringing in the right offense. I do think the Mega Ampharos, the fact that it was built very Spadef, was very nice to take on Thundurus. Overall, though, it was just a quick match when it came to seeing what was going to happen, and I think Crimson Seabat executed it much better than how he did last week, obviously.
And then taking a look at my last matchup, we have Gator and the Florida Gators versus Wolf Glick and the Milwaukee Bewares. The Gators have a roster of Mamoswine, Heatran, Crobat, Buzzwole, Drapion, and Mega Altaria, while the Bewares have the roster of Savali, Xurkitree, Alolan Muck, Jellicent, Bronzong, and Conkeldurr. So starting off this battle, the Gators Heatran sets up the Stealth Rocks while taking a bit of damage, but both sides do end up swapping around a little bit until the Heatran ends up toxicking the Jellicent, and the Jellicent sets up a Trick Room. Heatran is able to get quite a bit of damage on the incoming Bronzong, however, its Fire-type attack does activate the Bronzong's weakness policy. Unfortunately for Gator, he doesn't have much that can take on this thing in the Trick Room, especially not with the weakness policy boost. So he goes into the Crobat expecting an Earthquake, but Wolfie instead sets up his Rocks, which again puts Gator on a bit of a back foot, as he is going to try to remove these as quickly as possible, as he does have, I believe, 2 weaknesses and a Sashmon, so he definitely wants to try to keep those intact as well as he can. The Crobat is able to stall out a turn of the Trick Room, but Gator decides to bring in his Heatran, predicting another Gyro Ball, but it does fall to an Earthquake. Very good play by Wolfie. Without the Trick Room up, Gator is able to bring in his Drapion to revenge kill that Bronzong, and then Wolfie brings in his Jellicent. He goes for the Skull just to get a bit of damage, but Gator is able to use that opportunity to defog the rocks away, which is very important for him. This then results in Xurkitree taking quite a lot of damage from the Crobat due to a mispredict on Wolfie's part, but the Muck then comes in to take the next Brave Bird, which is enough damage to take out the Crobat with a recoil and activate the Muck's HP restoring Berry to get all of that health back right away. A bit of pivoting then occurs on both sides, where eventually gets to the point where the Altaria comes out and Mega evolves to set up a Dragon Dance, while Wolfie Z parting shots with his Savali to not only negate the attack boost, but also heal his Xurkitree back up to, I believe, full. Gator then barely misses out on a KO versus the Jellicent, so that it is able to set up a Trick Room once more, giving Conkeldurr a chance to knock out the Altaria, and then get some big damage versus the Buzzwole before going down to the Flame Z. The Buzzwole is then also able to take out the Savali, but it does go down to the Xurkitree. This leaves both sides in a predicament, as Wolfie believes that the Mamoswine may be potentially scarfed, in which case Gator would just win the game with an Earthquake. He also feared that if Gator was running a more offensive set, he would be able to get the kill with the Ice Shard, so it wouldn't matter anyways. While Gator, on the other hand, is fearing that Wolfie may have the potential of regular Hypnosis, because Gator knows that he is sashed, and Wolfie knows that he has the HP restoring berry. So if Gator goes for the Ice Shard and does not get the KO, then the Xurkitree gets healed from the berry, and it will break the Mamoswine's sash and be able to knock it out on the next turn, assuming like no weird shenanigans happen. So Gator figured that it would be his best play to go for a double Ice Shard, as if there was sleep involved, he would just lose the game anyways. Unfortunately though, for Wolfie, the Ice Shard does crit, knocking out the Xurkitree, so it cannot heal. This does give Gator the 1-0 victory. That being said, without the crit, the Mamoswine had a small chance of knocking out the Xurkitree, so it wasn't totally decided by the crit, but it definitely helped in Gator's favor. That all being said, make sure to check out both coaches' side, as they do discuss the hacks at the end of the battle, and it's definitely worth hearing what both of their thought processes were going into that turn. Moving on over to the conference breakdown, here we can see the 4 divisions up on screen now. Looking at the left side, there's definitely a bit more of a spread between the top and bottom teams for each division. In Ula Ula, we have MV at the top with 2-0 plus 7, while at the bottom we have the Columbus Chew 0-2 minus 8, and then a similar thing going on in Melee Melee with both the Gators and the Scissors tied with 2-0 plus 7, while the bottom team is 0-2 minus 10. So a bit of a gap there, but again, it is only week 2, so there's definitely time to catch up. Then looking over at the right side, we see the Kansas City Draw Chiefs close to both NV, Gator, and Chimpact with 2-0 plus 6, only 1 differential behind, and then obviously the Bronx Bearticks are down minus 2. And then looking at Akala, we actually have a similar thing but reversed. Instead of plus 6 minus 2, we have plus 2 minus 6. So yeah, none of these teams that look far behind right now are totally out of it. Obviously, it just takes 2 wins and maybe a loss for the players that are currently at the top to really bring things back together or even shift things up entirely. So again, this is week 2. As Confusion mentioned though, we are going to see quite a bit of changes as the season progresses, and this is just what it's shaped up to be now.
Yeah, like you mentioned, we have some crazy changes. I mean, it's only week 2, and you could kind of see how certain divisions are going to be following. I mean, if you look at Ula Ula, Columbus Chew are kind of going near the bottom, as well as the Giantes, as the Steelwings and Chinchargers are slowly rising up to the top of their division and are going to try to make a bigger bang. But Giantes, I know, can do really well. Columbus Chew, if they kind of change the way they do, can also do really well if they tried. Seeing Bronx Bearticks at the bottom of Pony and Montreal Hapsold at the bottom of Melee Melee is something I would have never expected. But if you also look at the Pony division, I mean, it's pretty stacked. Things like Borussia Donphan, Melbourne Rotoms, and the Draw Chiefs, I mean, those are some crazy good teams all stacked up in one division. So seeing the Bronx Bearticks low there at a 1-1, getting 1 win, 1 loss, I mean, it's the best division right now, most competitive, because none of them have taken 2 losses. They all have at least a win. And then obviously seeing Montreal Hapsolds at the bottom of Melee Melee is a little upsetting, and then seeing Luxrays and Sharpedos doing really well in Akala is something I'm happy to see, I expect to see, and I hope continues to be that way. And honestly, if I can see the Shadows and Necker Stevo and John, obviously it being John's season, last season here, doing a little bit more better, focusing on honing in on their skills, because I know they both do play well competitively, I still think they have a really good running chance here. It's just crazy how stacked all of these divisions are. Going to the league leaders though, let me tell you, they have changed a bunch. I mean, let's just look at them, because it's absolutely crazy what's sitting here. Number 1, we got Mega Pinsir. Oh, and just saying, guys, we had to record this a little early, so I had to actually do all the league leaders myself and add up all the tallies of kills and stuff. So if some of this is wrong and what you're hearing is not what you're seeing, my bad. Just know that what you're seeing is probably correct. Though, from what I think, Mega Pinsir is sitting at the top at 6-0, plus 6 differential. I mean, Envy just taking that monster home, getting 6 kills in only 2 games. That's crazy. And then obviously number 2, Nihil Lego getting 6 kills with only 1 death. Obviously doing just as well, just taking that 1 death, so putting it in silver. And then Crimson Seabad, known as one of the best league leaders, because this man has had crazy Pokemon in the league leaders before. I mean, last season, he had 2 Pokemon in the league leaders, one at number 1 and one at number 3. So this guy knows how to bring Pokemon to the top of the league leaders and get them a good amount of kills, and that's what he's doing here. It looks like Thundurus Incarnate, though, is going to be what's going to bring him home this time, sitting at 5-0. Looking at the rest, though, we still have that Xurkitree getting another kill this week, sitting at 5-1. Zygarde 10%. Obviously, it does not have it doesn't have a team to go along with, but it did still get 4 kills week 1, so it is still sitting up here along with Snorlax. Both of them are 4-0. Snorlax and Zygarde 10%. Weavile also at 4-2 at number 7. Then we have Arcanine, Heatran, Crocodile, as you can see, all at 3-0 with a +3 differential. Although Kyurem and Ludicolo are also 3-0 with a +3 differential. Just in terms of naming, I think they are not going to be shown. But they're still in the same kind of level, so you gotta give them credit to that. Looking over these Pokemon, though, I mean, it's kind of crazy to see that all of these Pokemon fit, right? The only thing I'd be a little confused about would be none of them. None of them. Like, there's not one Pokemon I'd be like, why is this thing up here? Maybe Arcanine. Usually you see Arcanine and Heatran, I guess, a little bit more defensively. But Crocodile, Weavile, Snorlax, Zygarde, Xurkitree, Thundee, Nihilego, Mega Pinsir. I mean, yeah, alright guys, so that was your weekly recap for week 2 of the GBA. If you guys are excited for week 3 coming up next week, we have a lot of good games, so be sure to look in the description below for the fan document, the GBA Discord, all that good stuff. Let us know if you're excited for week 3. If you guys thought that week 2 was really exciting, let us know your favorite matches and your thoughts, because I promise you I read through them, and I'm sure I can speak on behalf of Zilix that he will read through them too. And I'm interested to see what you guys have to say about these games as far as plays, whatever it may be. So thank you guys for watching, and we will see you guys next week on Wednesday. See ya.